The Tarathi homeworld of Vetala gleamed like a sapphire in the cosmic void, its 7 floating cities connected by streams of pure energy. For 3,000 years, the Tarathi had been the galaxy's master architects, shaping matter with thought and bending light itself to their will. Their gardens floated in zero gravity, sustained by crystalline matrices that hummed with inner light. Children learned to fly before they could walk, their bodies naturally generating the bioelectric fields that powered their civilization. Fleet Admiral Jaithkor watched from the observation deck of the Orbital Defense Station as trade ships arrived from distant worlds. Moloch's vessels twisted through space like living tentacles, while the geometric Proxian craft moved in perfect mathematical formations. The gas entity Eveth traveled in containment spheres that shimmered with rainbow energies. All came to Vetala to witness the latest Tarathi innovation, cities that could phase between dimensions, existing simultaneously in multiple realities. The first sign of catastrophe came from the mining colony of Zareth 9. Long-range sensors detected an anomaly approaching from deep space, a wall of absolute darkness that consumed light itself. Contact with Zareth 9 ceased abruptly. Within hours, automated probes revealed the truth. The entire planet had been transformed into a sphere of dull black crystal, its surface pockmarked with geometric patterns that hurt to look at. "It's not natural," whispered Dr. Morthek, the chief xenobiologist. "This is engineered, designed. The void plague spread faster than anyone imagined possible. It didn't move like a disease. It jumped, appearing simultaneously in systems light years apart. Wherever it touched, the result was the same. Worlds turned to dead crystal, their surfaces covered in angular scars that formed disturbing patterns." Cathara, one of the youngest ambassadors in Tarathi history, found herself tasked with the impossible, convincing the Galactic Council to break their primary law of non-interference. She traveled to the massive space station Concordia, where representatives of 47 species maintained the balance of galactic civilization. The council chamber was a marvel of engineering, a sphere 2 kilometers in diameter where gravity flowed in all directions. Each species had their designated area, adapted to their unique physiological needs. The Moloch's ambassador writhed in a pool of nutrient gel, her tentacles dancing in complex patterns. The Proxian delegate stood motionless, his mechanical form, uploading data directly to the station's networks. The Eveth representative flickered between states of matter, sometimes solid, sometimes pure energy. "Honored beings," Kithara began, her skin blazing with urgent patterns. "The void plague has consumed 12 of our worlds. Our scientists believe it originated from outside our galaxy, perhaps from the dark space between galactic clusters." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Proxian delegate's optical sensors flashed in rapid sequence as he processed data. "Our observations confirm the anomaly's extragalactic origin. However, we have detected similar patterns in our historical databases." "What lay? Do you mean?" Cathara asked. A 3-dimensional image materialized in the chamber's center. It showed a galaxy consumed by darkness, its spiral arms twisted into unnatural angles. "This image dates from the Great Silence, 7 million years ago. An entire galaxy went dark in less than a century. We assumed it was a natural stellar phenomenon." The Eveth representative pulsed with alarmed colors. "If this plague can consume galaxies, containment becomes the only logical option." Cathara's light speech took on desperate urgency. "We've lost 30% of our space already. Vetala itself will be consumed within a Tarathi cycle, perhaps 27 of your standard days. My people need evacuation ships, antimatter barriers, anything that can slow this advance." The debate lasted 18 hours. Species argued in languages of light, sound, thought, and electromagnetic pulse. Some advocated for immediate intervention. Others worried about exposing the galaxy to the plague. The Tarathi watched their fate, decided by beings who had never set foot on their worlds. Chancellor Vexthon of the Hexapod Collective finally called for the vote. One by one, species cast their decisions. The Molochs voted for intervention, their tentacles forming protective, Patterns. The Proxians calculated odds and voted for containment. The Eveths split their consciousness and voted both ways simultaneously. 26 species voted for quarantine. 19 voted for intervention. 2 abstained. The Council has decided, Chancellor Vexthon announced. Tarathi space will be sealed using a multi-dimensional barrier. The plague will be contained. Kethara's luminescence dimmed to almost nothing. You're sentencing my entire people to death. We are preserving the galaxy, the Proxian delegate stated without emotion. The needs of the trillion outweigh the needs of the billion. The council session ended. Within hours, a massive fleet assembled outside Tarathi space. Ships from dozens of worlds worked in coordination, their combined technologies creating something unprecedented. A barrier that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, sealing off an entire sector of the galaxy. From her suite aboard the EO diplomatic vessel, Kethara watched the barriers activate. Energy walls flickered to life, creating a cage of light around her people's space. The last council vessels withdrew, leaving the Tarathi alone with their approaching doom. She tried to call her homeworld, desperate to hear familiar voices one last time. Static filled the channel. The barriers blocked everything: communication, sensor readings, even light itself. The Tarathi had become invisible to the galaxy. As her diplomatic vessel approached the barrier to join her people in their final days, Kethara transmitted a message into the void. We were the first to harness pure energy, to build cities in 11 dimensions, to sing songs that could be seen by the blind. We asked only for help in our darkest hour. The galaxy has chosen to forget us. If any record remains of this moment, let it show. The Tarathi died not by plague alone, but by the indifference of those they once called friends. The ship passed through the barrier in a flash of rainbow fire. Behind them, the council fleets departed, leaving the Tarathi sector to its fate. The barriers hummed with power, a prison strong enough to contain a galaxy-killing plague. And within that prison, millions of Tarathi prepared to face extinction alone. The galaxy would be safe. The Tarathi would not. Talavesh pressed his glowing palms against the laboratory wall, watching the readings spiral into impossible numbers. The makeshift lab aboard the refugee ship Luminance shook as another overloaded power coupling exploded somewhere in the lower decks. Sparks of crystalline energy danced between his fingers as he struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. The plague isn't just destroying matter, he muttered to his assistant Corsair. It's rewriting the fundamental constants of physics. 3 months ago, Thalvesh had been the galaxy's foremost expert on energy crystallization, winner of 7 Galactic Science Awards. His floating laboratory on Vithala could manipulate matter at the quantum level, creating impossible sculptures that existed in 12 dimensions simultaneously. Now he worked in a repurposed cargo hold, using equipment jury-rigged from scavenged parts. Doctor, called Corsair, her usually brilliant skin flickering with exhaustion. The Zareth refugees are reporting something new. On the main screen, a haggard Tarathi captain appeared. Behind him, Thalvesh could see the cramped interior of an evacuation ship. Dr. Thalvesh, this is Captain Zephyrus of the cargo vessel Prism. We've been monitoring the plague's edge around our former mining world. It's changing. The image shifted to external sensors. The planet Zareth 9, once a thriving mining colony, now resembled a black glass sphere covered in angular scarring. But as they watched, new patterns began to emerge on its surface, geometric designs that pulsed with a sickly light. By the 7. Lights, whispered Thalvesh. The patterns were beautiful in a disturbing way, like fractals that hurt to perceive directly. It's not just killing the planet, it's transforming it into something else. Corsair activated their best sensors, struggling to penetrate the plague's interference. Doctor, I'm detecting energy readings from inside the converted worlds. The plague isn't dormant, it's building something. Across the Tarathi sectors, millions of ships fled from world to world as the darkness spread. The military corvette, Starweaver, barely escaped the fall of Kithra, her captain reporting that the plague had consumed an entire moon in less than 6 hours. The luxury liner, Crystal Song, carried evacuees from the artist colony on Melos, its holds packed with refugees clutching their few remaining possessions. On the command ship, Radiance, Fleet Commander Vexthar coordinated the chaos of evacuation. Her bridge was a maze of holographic displays showing the retreat of her people. Red markers indicated fallen worlds. Yellow showed systems under attack. The few remaining green dots shrunk daily. "We need every available ship at the Morith blockade," she commanded. "If that line falls, we lose access to the inner worlds." Young Lieutenant Kiervan worked feverishly at his post. "Commander, our perimeter sensors are detecting massive energy spikes from the plague zones. It's like it's preparing for something." Meanwhile, in the Deep Space Research Station, Golden Eye, scientists from every surviving Tarathi world gathered to study the plague. Dr. Yethnal, a field theorist, proposed wild theories. What if the plague isn't from our dimension? These energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. "Impossible," countered Dr. Morkett from her biolaboratory. "I've analyzed samples from the plague's edge. It's definitely interacting with our physics, but in ways that shouldn't be possible. It's like it's carrying instructions for rewriting reality itself." Thalavesh joined their discussions via quantum link, sharing his findings. "The plague shows signs of intelligence. Not biological intelligence, something else. The patterns it creates on consumed worlds. They're too complex to be random." The evacuation fleets faced constant challenges. Food synthesizers, designed for planetary populations, failed under the strain of feeding billions in space. The refugee ship, Harmony, lost life support for 18 hours before repairs could be made. Children cried for parents left behind. Elderly Tarathi, too frail for the journey, chose to remain on dying worlds rather than burden the escape fleets. On the industrial world of Kethmore, massive fabrication units worked around the clock, trying to produce enough supplies for the exodus. The factory ship builder's dream manufactured emergency shelters, food synthesizers, and basic life support equipment. But for every ship they equipped, 10 more appeared, filled with refugees and desperate for supplies. Dr. Silthera, the Tarathi's leading psychologist, documented the psychological toll. "We're witnessing the death of not just worlds but of our entire way of life. Our children are being born in space, never seeing the crystal cities or energy gardens of our homelands." As the safe zones shrunk, desperate Tarathi attempted increasingly dangerous experiments. A team on the research vessel, Last Hope, tried to create artificial pocket dimensions, hoping to hide entire populations from the plague. The experiment went wrong, tearing holes in spacetime that had to be sealed with the ship itself. "We're running out of options," Thalvesh admitted during an emergency council meeting. Representatives from every surviving world appeared as holograms, their light skin dim with exhaustion and despair. Elder Council member Thekvaroth, ancient even by Tarathi standards, made the final decision. "We cannot save our bodies, but perhaps we can save our souls. Dr. Thalvesh, initiate the knowledge cascade." The knowledge cascade was a theoretical project, never meant to be used. It would encode the entirety of Tarathi civilization, their language, history, art, science, and cultural memories, into a self-replicating energy pattern that could travel indefinitely through space. In a coordinate effort across 50 ships, Tarathi scientists and historians worked to compress their entire species' legacy. The poet-singer, Lysandra, contributed the eternal verses, songs that described the birth of their first city. The warrior-philosopher Gethion included the codes of honor that had guided their people for millennia. Children drew pictures of their parents, hoping someone would find them among the stars. Thalavesh stood in the center of Luminance's main transmitter room, surrounded by floating crystals that hummed with accumulated knowledge. Each crystal contained the memories of thousands of individuals: farmers, artists, engineers, parents, lovers, dreamers. "Initiating cascade sequence," he announced over the fleet-wide connection. Around him, the crystals began to resonate, their harmonic frequencies creating patterns of pure information. The transmission began slowly, then accelerated. Streams of golden light poured from every ship's transmitter, carrying the essence of Tarathi civilization into deep space. The signal would travel for millions of years, scattering across galaxies, a message in a bottle thrown into an infinite ocean. As the last data streams faded, Thalvesh felt a strange peace. At least someone somewhere might remember that Tarathi lived, he whispered, watching their people's legacy scatter among the stars like luminous seeds of memory. Behind him, Corsair placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Through the viewports, they could see the plague's edge approaching their current safe zone, only days away now. The crystalline darkness crept across space like a living thing, reaching out with geometric tentacles to claim the last Tarathi worlds. But among the stars, their message traveled on, carrying the light of their civilization to unknown recipients. Perhaps other species would find it. Perhaps they would remember that once in a small corner of an infinite universe, a people of light had existed, had loved, had dreamed, and had faced the end with dignity intact. Deep in the Tarathi command, center of the orbital station, Sanctuary's end, alarms blared with desperate harmony. Kithara watched the tactical display with growing dread. 7 more ships had just vanished from their sensors, consumed by the advancing plague. Only 48 hours remained before the darkness reached their final refuge. Contact on perimeter sensors, announced Communications Officer Vextai, his luminescent skin dim with exhaustion. Multiple vessels approaching barrier coordinates, 779. Kethera sighed, expecting to see the elegant curves of council ships bringing final judgment. Instead, her display showed something she'd never seen before. Angular, brutal crafts that looked like they'd been hammered together, from scrap metal and ceramic plates. Exhaust flames leaked from jury-rigged engines, and weapon hardpoints bristled with crude-looking cannons. By the 7 lights. "What are those things?" whispered Defense Coordinator Lormex. The ships moved in chaotic formations, banking and diving, with an unpredictability that made tracking difficult. Their hulls bore strange markings, letters and numbers in an alien script. Some vessels had painted artwork, snarling beasts, soaring birds, and abstract symbols that hurt Tarathi eyes to look at. "Identification request sent," Vextai reported. "Response coming through now." The main screen flickered, revealing a being unlike any Kithara had encountered. Where Tarathi were tall and radiant with natural bioluminescence, this creature was compact and solid, covered in a dull material that reflected no light. Its skin looked rough, scarred, and its small eyes held an alertness that seemed almost predatory. "Tarathi Station, this is Captain Park Jinhu of the Human Frontier Force." The being spoke through crude radio waves rather than elegant light speech. "We received your distress beacon. We're here to help." The bridge fell silent. Humans. Them. Council barely acknowledged them as sapient, classifying them as a primitive species that had barely achieved interstellar travel through stolen and borrowed technology. Their worlds were on the very edge of civilized space, in regions considered too dangerous or worthless for established species. "Captain Park," Kethara replied, using the clumsy verbal communication these creatures apparently preferred. "We appreciate your gesture, but this plague has defeated our greatest science. Your people cannot." "With respect, Ambassador." A different voice cut in, smoother and more controlled. "We've been tracking this plague for months. We think we know what it is." "Who speaks?" Kethara asked. "Dr. Yoon Minji, Xenoarchaeology, Department Seoul University," the voice responded. "We've had run-ins with similar phenomena in the Outer Rim." The display shifted to show another human, this one smaller than the captain, with keen eyes that darted constantly between multiple screens. Behind her, Kethara could see a ship's interior that looked like organized chaos, cables running everywhere, jury-rigged equipment sparking, and display screens showing data in formats she didn't recognize. "Impossible," muttered Lormex. "They're primitives. They still use chemical rockets and kinetic weapons." Captain Park seemed to hear him. "Sir, we may be primitives, but we're stubborn primitives. And sometimes being too primitive to know something's impossible is an advantage." On the tactical display, more human ships materialized. Unlike the orderly formations of council fleets, they moved in loose groups, each following its own erratic path. Some were clearly military vessels, bristling with weapons and armor. Others appeared to be modified cargo haulers, industrial ships, even what looked like converted passenger liners. "How many ships?" Cathara asked. "This is just the first wave," Captain Park replied. "We've got mining fleets from the asteroid belts, patrol boats from the frontier guards, and a full battle group from the Colonial Defense Force. Oh, and Professor Kim Dong-hyuk's research fleet." "A professor?" Vexthai asked in surprise. "Dr. Kim's our best expert on anomalous phenomena," Dr. Yoon explained. "He's dealt with things that shouldn't exist according to your council's physics textbooks." The human ships began taking positions along the plague barrier, their movements seemingly random but gradually forming a perimeter. Cathara noticed something odd. They weren't trying to maintain safe distances. Instead, some vessels moved dangerously close to the barrier itself. "Captain Park, you're entering the plague zone," she warned. "Our sensors show fatal contamination beyond those coordinates." "Noted and ignored," came the cheerful reply. "We've got some theories to test." Without warning, one of the human ships launched a device toward a plague-infected world. The object streaked through space, leaving a trail of exotic particles that made Tarathi sensors scream warnings. It struck the darkened planet's surface and detonated in a flash of harsh white light. "What was that?" Cathara demanded. "Exploratory warhead," Dr. Yoon replied casually. "Antimatter core surrounded by chromium, particles and dimensional folding devices. We call it a reality breaker." The explosion carved a massive crater in the plague world's surface, momentarily revealing the original rock beneath the dark crystalline infection. For just a few seconds, sensor readings from that area returned to normal. "Interesting, Doctor," Yoon murmured. "The plague isn't as uniform as we thought. There are gaps in its coverage." Captain Park's ship, a massive destroyer called the Soul's Fury, moved closer to the barrier. Its hull gleamed with what looked like primitive armor plating. But Cathara's enhanced sensors detected strange energy patterns within the metal itself. "Your ship," she observed. "It's not entirely conventional." "Nothing about humans is conventional." Park laughed. "This old girl's got Tarathi energy-focusing crystals we salvaged from a derelict trader, Proxian computing matrices we bought from smugglers, and a few modifications our engineers cooked up. We're good at making things work together that shouldn't." More human vessels moved into position. A group of sleek ships bearing university markings deployed sensor arrays that looked like metallic flowers opening in space. Industrial vessels began constructing what appeared to be a forward base on a large asteroid, their work drones swarming over the rock like mechanical insects. "How did you get past the council barriers?" Cathara asked. "Who says we went through them?" Dr. Yoon replied with what might have been amusement. "Humans are excellent at finding backdoors, loopholes, and alternative routes. The council builds walls. We tunnel under them." The commander of the research fleet, Professor Kim, joined the communication. His voice carried age and authority, though he looked younger than Captain Park. "Ambassador Cathara, we've seen plagues like this before. Smaller ones, localized to single systems. We studied them, fought them, learned from them. But you're newcomers to galactic civilization," protested Lormex. "Your species has barely had interstellar travel for centuries." "Which means we haven't had time to develop your preconceptions," Kim replied. "When something's impossible according to established science, we try it anyway. Sometimes impossibility is just a failure of imagination." A massive human ship emerged from hyperspace, dwarfing even the largest Tarathi vessels. Its hull was a patchwork of different materials and technologies, looking like a flying scrapyard, but the energy readings it produced were staggering. "What is that thing?" gasped Vexthai. "That's the Indomitable," Captain Park announced with obvious pride. "Flagship of Admiral Lee Suho's Deep Space Combat Group. She might look like hell, but she's tough enough to ram a gas giant." The Indomitable began deploying smaller vessels from its cavernous hangar bays. They emerged in streams: fighters, bombers, assault boats, and stranger craft whose purposes Cathara couldn't guess. One looked like a giant drill with engines. Another resembled a metallic squid with too many tentacles. We brought friends, Dr. Yoon said, and Kithara detected something like a grin in her voice. Lots of friends. The Tarathi bridge crew watched in amazement as the human fleet organized itself with chaotic efficiency. Where council forces would have formed perfect geometric patterns, the humans created organic-looking swarms that shifted and flowed like living things. Ambassador, Captain Park's voice grew serious. We're going to try something dangerous, something the council would never approve of. We're going to enter the plague zone and confront this thing directly. That's suicide, Kithara protested. Our best scientists couldn't even slow its advance. Your best scientists think like scientists, Park replied. We think like scavengers, pirates, and survivors. There's a difference. As if to demonstrate, one of the human ships fired a weapon that defied classification. It wasn't energy, wasn't projectile. It was something that made space itself twist and buckle. Where it struck the plague barrier, reality rippled like water. What was that? Kithara breathed. Prototype spatial disruptor, Dr. Yoon explained. Dr. Kim's latest creation. It convinces reality to forget what it's supposed to be doing. The effect was temporary, but for a few moments, a gap opened in the plague barrier. Through it, the humans poured like water through a broken dam. Their ships diving into the infected zone with what could only be described as enthusiastic recklessness. They're insane, whispered Lormex. Kithara watched the primitive vessels disappear into darkness and wondered if he might be right. The human ships moved through the plague zone like metal sharks through poisoned water. Kithara watched from Sanctuary's end as their vessels ignored every safety protocol, diving deep into regions where Tarathi sensors showed only death. Captain Park's destroyer, Soul's Fury, led the charge, its hull glowing from the thermal stress of pushing through the plague barrier. Behind it followed a convoy that defied description, military vessels mixed with cargo haulers, research ships welded to mining platforms, and what appeared to be a heavily modified vacation cruiser, with missile pods strapped to its sides. This can't work, muttered Thalvesh, monitoring their progress from his laboratory. They're violating every principle of... His words were cut off as the human ships opened fire. But these weren't the elegant energy beams or quantum missiles that Tarathi would have used. Instead, crude kinetic projectiles screamed through space, followed by what could only be described as garbage being fired from cannons. Are they shooting rocks at it? Asked Corsair in disbelief. Dr. Yoon's voice crackled through the communications array. Radioactive tungsten rods with embedded tachyon generators and quantum uncertainty amplifiers, also known as very expensive rocks that argue with reality. One of the projectiles struck a plague-infected asteroid. The impact should have been minimal, a tiny wound in a cosmic infection. Instead, the asteroid began to vibrate. Cracks spread across its dark crystal surface, and for a moment, patches of normal rock showed through. Impossible, breathed Thalvesh. Professor Kim's voice joined the channel, speaking with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to children. You've been thinking of the plague as an infection to be cured, but it's not a disease. It's a standing wave in space-time itself, a pattern that maintains itself by reinforcing its own existence. The human research ship, Wuhan's Pride, deployed a device that looked like a giant metal spider. Its legs extended, touching the fabric of space itself, and suddenly the plague's perfect geometric patterns began to wobble. You see, Kim continued, standing waves require steady conditions. Introduce enough chaos, enough uncertainty, and the pattern becomes unstable. The Tarathi watched in horror and fascination as more human ships arrived. The industrial vessel, Heavy Metal, began deploying construction drones that moved with violent unpredictability. Instead of following programmed patterns, they seemed to have been given one instruction: cause mayhem. Captain Park's tactical screen showed dozens of human vessels organizing into what looked like controlled chaos. Fighters zipped between capital, ships in patterns that would have given council pilots nightmares. Bombers approached their targets in spirals that defied all tactical doctrine. It was beautiful in its own terrifying way. How do you coordinate such randomness? Asked Vexthai. We don't, laughed Park. We give general objectives and let each crew figure out their own approach. Humans are natural improvisers. Give us impossible situations, and we'll invent equally impossible solutions. The human fleet demonstrated this philosophy with dramatic flair. The converted freighter, Iron Dragon, launched hundreds of small drones, each programmed with a different strategy for disrupting the plague. Some fired sonic pulses at frequencies that shouldn't work in vacuum. Others deployed clouds of smart particles that reorganized themselves randomly every few seconds. Most disturbing to Tarathi sensibilities was the human use of what they called friendly fire. Captain Oh Sung-yoon of the patrol boat, Thunder Child, deliberately flew into the fire zone of his own allies, using their weapons' effects to create interference patterns that confused the plague. "You're shooting your own ships," protested Lormex. "Grazing fire only," Oh replied cheerfully. "Billy boy here is tough enough to take it, aren't you, girl?" He patted his ship's console affectionately. The human approach to research proved equally unconventional. Where Tarathi scientists would establish safe observation posts light years away, the human research teams built stations inside the plague zone itself. The mobile laboratory, Beijing's gamble, literally parked on the surface of a plague-infected world. Dr. Yoon coordinated multiple experiments simultaneously, her voice crackling with excitement despite the danger. "We're getting incredible readings here. The plague exists in 11 dimensions, but it's only stable in our local reality because of the harmonic resonance between its different dimensional phases." "That's what we've been trying to tell you," Thalavesh exclaimed. "Yes, but you've been trying to strengthen the barriers between dimensions," replied Professor Kim. "We're doing the opposite. Watch this." A human ship designated as Soul's Hammer fired something that wasn't quite energy and wasn't quite matter. Where it struck a plague-darkened moon, reality itself seemed to hiccup. For several seconds, the plague pattern flickered between states, showing glimpses of the original lunar surface beneath. "Dimensional destabilizer," Kim explained proudly. "It convinces different layers of reality to work at slightly different speeds. The plague can't maintain coherence when its dimensional anchors are out of sync." More human ships arrived in waves, each bringing new chaos. The mining vessel, Ulsan's Revenge, deployed asteroid-cracking charges in a seemingly random pattern around a plague-infected world. When they detonated simultaneously, the shaped explosions created a ripple effect that propagated through 11 dimensions. The plague reacted with what could only be described as confusion. Its perfect crystalline patterns began developing flaws, tiny imperfections that spread like cracks in glass. "It's working," gasped Kethara. "Your chaos is disrupting its order." "Chaos is just order we don't understand yet," replied Dr. Yoon. "And humans specialize in not understanding things productively." The human assault reached its crescendo when Admiral Lee Suho's flagship Indomitable joined the fray. The massive vessel deployed its most unusual weapon, a device that looked like a spinning disco ball covered in mirrors and crystals. "What is that thing?" asked Thalavesh. "We call it the mirror ball of maximum doom," Admiral Lee announced solemnly. "It reflects the plague's pattern back at itself, but reversed and phase-shifted. Imagine looking in a funhouse mirror that hates you." The mirror ball spun faster, its reflective surfaces catching and distorting the plague's dimensional patterns. Where its light touched infected matter, the dark crystals began to crack and dissolve. "This is barbaric," protested Thalavesh, watching, the elegant geometric patterns of the plague being reduced to chaos. "This is survival," Dr. Yoon corrected. "Sometimes you have to break symmetry to fix a pattern." The combined human assault created a cascade effect. As plague patterns destabilized in one area, the disruption spread to adjacent regions. The infection that had seemed unstoppable began showing wounds, gaps where normal matter reasserted itself. Captain Park's reinforcements continued to arrive, wave after wave of volunteers from every corner of human space. Mining crews from asteroid belts, patrol boats from frontier worlds, converted merchant vessels crewed by adventurers who thought fighting cosmic plagues sounded like fun. They established research stations where no council species would dare venture, building their outposts directly in the plague's path. Each station was a monument to human stubbornness. a declaration that some problems were solved not by retreating to safe distance, but by charging straight into danger with improvised weapons and unshakable determination. "You're all completely insane," Lormex observed, watching a human crew land on a partially infected world to collect samples. "Thank you," Captain Park replied. "We've worked hard to maintain our reputation." The breakthrough came at 3:27 in the morning, ship time, when Dr. Yoon accidentally spilled coffee on her quantum analysis equipment. Instead of cursing, she stared at the readings as the caffeine-soaked circuits produced chaotic data patterns that somehow made perfect sense. "That's it," she shouted, waking half the research team. "The plague isn't just consuming energy, it's learning from it." In the makeshift laboratory aboard the Soul's Fury, Terathi and human scientists worked side by side for the first time. Thalvesh watched in amazement as Dr. Yoon's team used computers that literally fought with each other, each one trying to solve the problem differently before combining their results into a coherent whole. "This is madness," muttered Thalvesh, observing human technicians bang on malfunctioning equipment with hammers until it worked again. "Controlled madness," corrected Professor Kim, whose hair stuck out in wild directions from days of sleep deprivation and too much caffeine. "We've been analyzing your plague for 3 weeks now. It's not natural. Someone made this thing." Dr. Yoon pulled up a holographic display that hurt Terathi eyes to look at directly. The equations moved and writhed like living things, but within the chaos, patterns emerged. Ancient council records speak of the Silence Wars, 7 million years ago. This plague matches perfectly with theoretical weapons from that era. "Impossible," breathed Cathara. "The council would never—" "The modern council didn't create this," Kim interrupted, "but their predecessors did. This plague was designed specifically to consume civilizations that think in ordered patterns. Energy-based societies like yours are the perfect victims." On the main screen, battle reports showed the human chaos strategy gaining ground. Captain O's patrol boat, Thunder Child, had just liberated an entire asteroid belt by flying through it while playing rock music so loud it created sonic disruptions in the plague's pattern. The mining ship Heavy Metal used its drilling equipment to bore random holes in infected space, creating imperfections that spread like cracks in glass. "But why can't it adapt to you?" asked Thalvesh. Dr. Yoon grinned, showing teeth that gleamed, too white in the artificial light. "Because we don't think in patterns. Look at this." She displayed brain scans from various species. The Terathi patterns were beautiful, organized energy flows that created perfect geometric shapes. The Molochs showed spiral thinking patterns. The Proxians displayed crystalline logic structures. Then came the human brain scans. They looked like explosions, chaotic bursts of activity that changed constantly, never forming stable patterns. "We're chaos engines," Yoon explained proudly. "We think randomly, act unpredictably, create solutions that shouldn't work but do anyway. The plague tries to learn our patterns, but we don't have consistent patterns to learn." The combined solution required both species' strengths. Terathi energy mastery provided the power, while human chaos mathematics created the disruption patterns. Working together, they built a device that looked like cosmic dice made of pure energy, a tool that would literally confuse the plague to death. Admiral Lee's flagship, Indomitable, carried the device to the center of the plague zone, protected by a mixed fleet of human and Terathi vessels. The human ships moved in their typical chaotic fashion, while Terathi escorts generated protective energy shields that shifted color like aurora. "All units, prepare for Chaos Protocol 7, Admiral Lee announced. "Remember, if your plan makes too much sense, you're doing it wrong." The device activated, sending waves of organized chaos through the plague zone. It was beautiful and terrible, order and disorder dancing together in cosmic ballet. Where the waves touched plague-infected worlds, the dark crystals began to unravel, like poorly knitted sweaters. "It's working!" shouted Captain Park, watching his sensors as entire worlds returned to their original states. The plague's perfect patterns couldn't maintain themselves when faced with weapons that followed no pattern at all. System by system, world by world, the Terathi reclaimed their space. Each cleansed planet emerged like a flower blooming after winter, its natural beauty restored. The great crystal cities flickered back to life, their energy patterns once again flowing in harmonious designs. The final battle took place at Vitala itself, the Tarathi homeworld. The plague had concentrated here, creating a massive geometric pattern that covered the entire planet. But when the chaos wave hit, the pattern tried to adapt, then fragmented, then simply gave up, dissolving like mist before the morning sun. Standing on the restored surface of Vithala, Cathara watched the barriers that had trapped her people dissolve. Free Tarathi flowed back from the refugee fleets, lighting up their homeworld with their natural bioluminescence. The crystal cities hummed back to life, their energy gardens blooming with impossible flowers that existed in 12 dimensions. Captain Park stood beside her, his rough human features somehow fitting perfectly in the surreal landscape. His ship's crew was already preparing to leave, their job done. "Your people saved us," Cathara said, her light patterns conveying gratitude beyond words. "Beings who the Council called primitive, who we never respected. Why did you help us?" Park smiled, adjusting his battered jacket. "Because someone had to. And maybe the galaxy needs more chaos and fewer rules." At the edge of the system, Council ships finally appeared, elegant vessels moving in perfect formation. They demanded answers, explanations, detailed reports about how primitives had succeeded where their best scientists had failed. The humans provided none. Their ships were already breaking formation, scattering to a dozen different destinations. Some returned to frontier worlds to continue their trading routes. Others vanished into deep space, chasing rumors of ancient artifacts and unexplored planets. Admiral Lee's flagship, Indomitable, headed toward the galactic edge, where scouts reported something interesting in the void between galaxies. "Where are they going?" asked Vexthai, watching the human ships disappear into hyperspace. "Everywhere," Cathara replied. "Humans don't stay still. They're always moving, always exploring, always looking for the next impossible challenge." The Council delegation arrived to find the Tarathi already rebuilding, their cities more beautiful than before. But now there were differences: asymmetrical spires that reached toward the stars, energy gardens that grew in wild profusion, art that combined perfect order with deliberate imperfection. "The humans influenced them," complained Council diplomat Thexvar. "They've contaminated the Tarathi's perfect culture." "No," Cathara replied, watching a group of Tarathi children play, a human game that had no rules and too many winners. "They've taught us that perfection isn't perfect unless it includes room for chaos." The Tarathi thrived under their new alliance with humanity. They learned to build ships that could improvise solutions mid-flight, to create art that surprised its own creators, to think in patterns that had no patterns. When Council inspectors visited months later, they found Tarathi scientists using hammers to fix delicate equipment, and it worked. Throughout the galaxy, word spread of the humans' victory. The species that couldn't get their ships to form proper formations had defeated a weapon that had destroyed entire galactic civilizations. The primitives who used chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles had solved a problem that energy masters couldn't even slow down. On frontier worlds and in deep space stations, humans went about their business, largely unaware of their growing reputation. They fixed problems with duct tape and determination, explored dangerous phenomena out of curiosity, and helped strangers because it seemed like the right thing to do. The galaxy was forced to reconsider its definitions. What was civilization? What was advancement? Could it be that the species flying slightly drunk through space, making up solutions as they went, were actually more advanced than those who built their societies on perfect, predictable patterns? The Tarathi never forgot their salvation came from the least expected source: the primitive humans who dared to care when the rest of the galaxy turned away. They built monuments to the partnership, crystal spires that incorporated deliberate flaws, beautiful imperfections that caught and scattered light in unpredictable ways. And somewhere in deep space, human ships continued their chaotic journey among the stars, carrying coffee stains and jury-rigged equipment and the unshakable conviction that any problem could be solved if you just threw enough random solutions at it until something worked. The galaxy was a messier place now, but perhaps that was exactly what it had been missing: The end.